Powerful stories, powerful sound. This is B360 Productions, where your voice takes center stage.
Welcome to Endeavor to Connect, a podcast from the Blind Endeavors Foundation. I'm your host, Steve Baskis. In this episode, we're talking about relationships, caregiving, and communication, and what it means to build a healthy, supportive partnership when one person is blind or visually impaired. Blindness exists on a spectrum shaped by personal experience, adaptation, and independence. And those differences can play a big role in how people connect and communicate. Today's conversation explores how curiosity, patience, teamwork, and honest communication help navigate misunderstandings, adapt to challenges, and strengthen relationships over time. Allie, when we first met on that flight, what were your thoughts about me? You, of course, realized I was a blind person, and I was with my friend Larry traveling home.
Well, the whole crew was like, oh my God, who is this cutie? And then we're like, oh, that's interesting. There were two blind people. So the crew decided to move your seats to see if you guys wanted to sit together. And then I remember you two knew each other or were meeting to go to the same event. So I thought, oh, where are you headed? And you said, oh, we're going ice climbing. And I said, we all kind of looked at each other dumbfounded. We said, you're going ice climbing? But didn't you say that you're completely blind? And you're like, oh yeah, but it's a very tactile sport. And I think I am rarely speechless, but I think I was completely dumbfounded by this.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure a lot of people feel this way when they hear some blind person say something quite like that or something similar. How much did you know about the blind or visually impaired community before meeting me?
Zero, zilch, nothing. I've seen people who are blind. I lived in big metropolitan cities, so it wasn't uncommon to see a blind person walking with a dog or with a cane, but I had never sat down and actually met anyone who was blind before. I had watched a movie about a blind guy once, but I never had one-on-one experience talking and learning about what someone can and cannot do.
No, I get it. Of course, people who listen to this show and know me and know you understand that I lost my eyesight because of traumatic injury, specifically because of my service with the U.S. Army on the ground in Baghdad, Iraq during the Iraq War, serving with the U.S. Army. And so did that shape how you perceived my, independence or who I was as a blind person, or did it have any kind of effect over your thoughts about my particular blindness? You spent a lot of time with me and a number of other blind people. Now, I've been blind 17 years. You and I have been dating now at the time of this recording almost 6 years, if not longer. Does that matter to you, or did that matter at the time, if you can even remember?
I'm not sure if those two things corresponded for me with regards to your blindness. Of course, I have a lot of high regard for military veterans. My grandfather served, my great uncle served. So, when you said you were a Purple Heart recipient, I was very moved by that. But as far as how you had your injury and how the fact that it occurred from a military incident versus how it would be different if you were blind from birth, or I don't think I can say that I've met enough blind people or that I can make a fair comparison. I also think people are so individual. So even if I had met people who were blind in other ways, we can't say that, their temperament might be different because it didn't happen from war, or something like this. I think that's too generalized. I think we all have to be really careful when we make those gross generalizations. But I think, being blown up in a war has to have, there has to be an aftermath to that. And I think you work really hard, along with many other people that you've introduced me to, rehabilitate, reform, adapt, and, continue to live a fulfilling life.
Yeah, I think it is important for people to understand that just like anybody journeying through life or, building their life, growing as a person, we choose different things to learn, different paths to take. Some go to college, some don't. Some go right into working, and those experiences shape who we are. And it's the same thing for a blind person. I guess the big difference is, since we're trying to inform our listeners and just kind of give perspective, sometimes people lose their sight later in life because of trauma or disease or whatever, and others are born and grow differently and have to use other languages like Braille in their education, and that shapes them in a different way. And the things that they're told or explained to, the different things that adults, the people in their lives, the person who's blind or visually impaired spends the most time with, they learn how to perceive the world in a certain way. Just like, again, even if you were sighted. But I know that serving in the military and all of that really helped me, of course, be a stronger person because of in the short period of time that I served, the things I experienced and the loss of friends and a good teammate who died next to me. So that traumatic event, of course, drastically changed my life forever. And I had to make a decision, personally in the hospital bed about how to move forward, and to accept some of the things that were being told to me at the time, and the opportunities and the ability to rehab, recover, reform, like you're talking about, to adapt. But that's what everybody really has to do to live a somewhat successful or content, happy life.
You say it's what they have to do, but some people like yourself have really excelled at that. And
I'm just saying, if you don't do it, the other direction is a downward spiral.
Sure.
So you don't have to. I guess I improperly use the wrong words, but I feel I had to. I have to, or I give up on life. But this episode is not about that. It's about relationship. It's about your perspective about blindness and relationship. So, did anything surprise you about the way I travel or, live life, between now and when you first met me, all the different things, whether it's technology, the tools I use, or just my ears, these are things that you didn't have any experience with, like you mentioned just a moment ago.
Well, everything surprised me, to be quite honest with you. I remember meeting you. I remember exchanging business cards at the end of the flight, and I go, what the heck? Why did I give this guy my business card? Like, I'm an idiot. Like, I didn't know that there was technology for you to actually see the card or have the card read to you, in other words. And I remember going home, and my best friend and roommate at the time, I said, oh, I met this really unusual guy. He's fascinating. I'd love to follow up with him. I said, I was telling her, he's completely blind. Do you think blind people can text? And she's like, I don't think so. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And she said, you should just call him. And I'm going to be like, what am I going to say? Hi, this is your flight attendant. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to text. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. So I sent off that first text, and you answered right away. And I was like, how is he doing this? Like, I'm a magician, but to me, these initial discoveries were like everything. First of all, for a person who has had no contact with a blind person, the only way we can put ourselves in your shoes is just to close our eyes. So if I even close my eyes right now and I'm like, oh, you have to tie your shoe. No way. Oh, you have to navigate through, this house filled with all this furniture and all this art and all this magic. No way. And then you would come out telling stories like, oh, yeah, I just finished kayaking the Colorado River 26 miles in my own hard shell down the rapids. And at this point, you're just like absolutely gobsmacked. So to say I'm surprised, yeah, I mean, again, the surprise comes from my own ignorance, right? I think if I had met other blind people before, or now when I see your whole community and I see like Lonnie out swing dancing and, AJ doing the, whatever those things, those rings, obstacle at the Tough Mudder, you're like, oh, all right, you're just a above average blind guy. But when you think that you can't tie your own shoe with your eyes closed, of course everything became surprising. But that's my own ignorance, and you've taught me so much, really, and your community has taught me so much.
Yeah, I mean, I get people get excited when someone sings well or learns how to play a piano. Generally. So I think it's just a normal human experience or feeling, and something is weird when people know that someone has a disability. Like if I made a video or I made something and people are looking at me and they see me do something, but it doesn't, show any kind of indication or sign that I'm blind, they're going to be amazed because, it's a whitewater kayaking but once they learn I'm blind, it like changes the way people think, and so I think, again, people are amazed at all kinds of people, disability or not. But I like to remind people I'm proud of showing, resilience or courage or this feeling of hope, the desire to still pursue things and be excited about life. That's more what I feel, having that drive or that feeling to this, big ambition or goal, these goals that I set. That's important to me. There's so many things in our lives that challenge us. So I feel tying shoes or making coffee or something.
Even eating dinner. I'll tell you. I was on a layover once in Paris, and there's a restaurant called Dans le Noir, which roughly translates to in the black or in the dark. And the restaurant is actually, all the servers are blind or visually impaired. And you walk in and you make like a train with you and your guests. Like you put your hand on the server's shoulder, and then your date puts their hand on your shoulder, and then your brother puts your hands on their shoulder. So you make a little train and they sit you down, and you cannot see your hand in front of your eyes. I mean, it's pitch black and you don't know what you're eating. You got to find your silverware. I remember I started trying to use my fork and knife, and then I was like, forget it. Nobody can see me. So I just used my hands. So even everyday things.
Well, that's adapting.
Yeah.
And walking with people is, that are helping you, even if they're blind. Like people jokingly say, like the blind leading the blind. It's just called sighted guide, or you have a guide. And so even if it's a blind person leading because they are familiar with the space, you're still being guided, and that's not uncommon in blind sinners and and in life in general, because there's people that have low vision and they might have enough sight to really be a leader or a guide. And sometimes the completely blind person is just so better prepared in a space. But, yeah, and it's the same thing with the eating, like you bring up. I think that's important, like the experience of being forced to go to an unfamiliar place in an unfamiliar setting, going through those motions really teaches a person how you have to think every moment of your life when you're in unfamiliar places as a blind person. And that's the key thing, is that you're problem solving all the time, you're troubleshooting. And so you're a private investigator, like you're trying to decipher or determine what kinds of noises you're hearing, what the setting is, what's going on in a certain direction, where people are, if you hear toilets flushing and water, maybe that doorway leads to the restroom, but does it lead to the female or male's, restroom? I hear coffee espresso machines in the hallways in the terminal at the airport. You smell it, you're drawn to it. Those are the things, you smack your cane, your long white cane on the ground, and you drag it and you feel it transition to carpet, or you feel it drop, and that's stairs. Those are the things that's a blind person's life. And when you close your eyes, you just imagine it for a moment. It's fleeting, and you're usually in a space that's familiar. So
Exactly.
yeah, it might be remarkable to just move around in your own space that without seeing, but it's just more challenging to do it in an unfamiliar setting, an unfamiliar place. And I think those kinds of things are like the restaurant you described. It's like dining in the dark is usually the theme. And nonprofits and certain organizations will put on these kinds of experiences. Sometimes they are total blackout scenarios. Other times they're not as dark, but dark enough to make it challenging. And I think that's a great way to introduce someone to blindness and the challenge of eating. Eating is a challenging thing. Using a tool, kind of like playing baseball and having hand-eye coordination, or shooting a basketball, or catching something, as requires hand-eye coordination, and these kinds of things. You have to find a different way to do them, or become really skilled at using the same tools. But yeah, that's the cool thing. You think unconventionally, because a lot of times society teaches you to think a conventional way. And so blind people, or people that have lost their sight, or even just born blind, they learn how to do things differently, or accept doing things in a different way. Hopefully, that's what I've gained. I think we'll move on to another question, because we could talk about all these things in a bigger way. Blindness, facial gestures, mannerisms, our expressions, are such an important thing in day-to-day life. Did we ever misunderstand each other, or have was there any kind of problem, do you recall, with communicating with me at any point? Maybe it's hard to recall or remember, but I just often wonder, because I forget. Ignorance is bliss. I could be having a conversation with you and say something that upsets you, just like anybody, or I could have with anybody, and I don't see them get upset visually, which might change how I want to say the next thing or react to them. And not having that really affects me personally, because I was a very visual person, of course. Do you recall?
Yeah, I would say this is one of the single biggest challenges that we have, because I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think allegedly over half of the communication between people is nonverbal. And so if you're missing those cues, whether it's a smile or the fatigue or the fact that someone looks drained or hunched over or limping, which of course you could feel the limp if you're walking with someone, but if you're not, then you wouldn't know. I think this is a day-to-day challenge. And I think that there are a couple things that I've learned so far, but I think that this is a long journey. I remember one time in Central Park, you told me right when we started dating, you said, if you're feeling upset, you have to tell me because I might not see you if you're crying or you look like you're about to cry. I'll have no way of knowing. And I've also noticed during our relationship, I'll say something that I think is incredibly benign, and you'll snap back at me and you'll say, I didn't like your tone. And I thought, wow, like I really did not intend for this to go that way. But I realize now, when we're not in the heat of the moment, that that is the only thing you have to go on. You don't know that I'm sitting on the bed relaxing and I said it. You don't know that I might just be a little bit tired because I have not expressed that to you in any way.
It could be sarcastic.
I could be making a joke. It could be sarcasm, but the only clue that you get is my tone. Unless you're, you don't know my posture, you don't know my facial expression. So I think that this is when people talk about cost benefit analysis, I think this is definitely a challenge of dating a blind person. But I think that the pros outweigh this. And I think it's something that if you're in a blind-sighted relationship, this is something that can be improved upon. And I think Stephen and you and I are testament to this. And I think just doing the fact that you're like, Allie, would you like to do this interview means that you're still interested in my thought process and I'm still interested in your thought process. So we have to collectively work at being better communicators. And I have to, especially the onus of responsibility is on me to say, oh no, like I didn't mean it like that. And for you to say, oh, I'm sorry, I misinterpreted that. But I think that you can't skirt around it. There's no way to be like, oh yeah, that's the white elephant in the room. That's something that we have to work on. But I think we're getting much better at it.
I think communication is always something that people have to work on, and blindness just helps us be better communicators because we have to think about it. It's like blindness. When we become conscious of this concept, we know we need to work at it if we want to have things. But that's really any relationship. So communication is always something that has to be improved. And I think blindness doesn't prevent me from knowing if you're sad or upset, or I really can sense when there's a problem, and I think a lot of people can. But that, my guess or assumption or quick analysis would be, it's because we have a relationship. We learn, about each other over time, and we know, oh, they're being really quiet. That's not normal. They must be thinking about something, or, and sometimes when people get emotional, you can still hear, sniffling or other kinds of things. So you can recognize, but you can definitely easily overlook it or miss it because of the blindness, because of the barrier. It is fascinating, and it is something that can be challenging. And more importantly, for people who are like looking at having a relationship with someone who's blind, they may overanalyze things. You have to have a relationship with someone in general to better understand a person. When I just walk up to people and have a conversation, they could they could get really upset, and with no verbal, with not expressing it, not in any way, and I would not know. So it's like we'll walk away and totally think about the conversation in a different way. But it's quite interesting, and again, it's a big topic. We could talk about it for hours. We'll move on though. How do you balance stepping in to help me versus stepping back and allowing me or letting me, find my own independence? Do you have any kind of comments or?
Boy, Steve, you ask all the hard questions, only the hard ones. Of course, this is another challenging topic because, like I said, I hate to beat a dead horse, but in the beginning, I did not know the capabilities of you or any blind person. But I'll be honest, before I dated you or considered dating you, if you recall, I made it a point to come out to where you lived rather early on, perhaps earlier than I would in a different sort of relationship, because I didn't know, like, can a blind person cook their own food? Can a blind person do their own laundry? Can a blind person cook? I did not know any of this. And it was important to me in choosing a partner that I wanted precisely that. I don't mind helping, but I wasn't looking to be a caregiver. I wanted a partner. And so really, as far as I'm concerned, you can do anything that I can except for drive. Now, after that, it's a choice of personal preference. And sometimes I ask you to do something and you're like, oh, I'm blind with one good hand. And I have to backtrack and say, oh, yep, you know what? That's fair. But I treat you as my equal in spite of you not having your eyes. And I rely on you to say, oh, can you help me with this? Or to remind me that you don't like doing certain things because they're harder for you. But if you don't tell me that, I look at us on even footing for pretty much everything. And in fact, like, not only just physical things, like whether to help you or not help you, but like when we argue, or if I have to see you as my equal, because if I didn't, I would say we'd fight and I'd be like, oh, Allie, like, forget it. Like, he wins. Like, he's blind with one good hand. Like, I could have the worst day at work and be like, I was delayed. I was miserable. My passengers were horrible. My crew sucked. The hotel had bed bugs. And I'm so appreciative that you listen and you don't come back and say, yeah, well, at least you're not blind, right? Because that would just never work. And it would totally be fair because, in my opinion, the blindness certainly trumps having bad crew and bad passengers. But I treat you as my equal. You act as my equal. You never throw that in my face. And I think that that's what makes it work.
Yeah, I think I've grown and changed, and I've jokingly said things that, well, you're not blind or you don't have a hand disability, but it isn't fair to say those kinds of things. We all have our challenges we have to deal with, and it is being understanding and listening, like you're talking about. That's just, again, this is just I think a general rule for relationships. But it is, the blindness is such a fascinating thing. I think just not being so hyper focused on it would be a tip or a strategy that I would say when for people who meet someone who's blind. It's just communicating with them just like a normal person, like you're saying, treating them like an equal. And when, hopefully, and this is a problem with people that have recently lost their vision and their blindness. It's like, where do you draw the line? Like, they have to learn to accept things. They have to learn how to ask for help. Sometimes people don't want to ask for help. And I think the kindest thing you can do to someone is like, I see you're struggling and I understand that you can do something. And you're, it's remarkable, like, what you can accomplish without sight, because from my perspective, and this sometimes can sound degrading. I think everybody perceives these things differently. Blind people can be, proud. They can be upset. They don't want to hear, apologies, or there's so many things. We all are different people. So you have to be careful, and you have to adapt to the person that's right in front of you. At the end of the day, you can't generalize and treat people like a cookie cutter kind of thing. So I think our conversation about this whole topic is really important. And again, we're just kind of scratching the surface on a lot of these things. I hope that people just do try to communicate well. That's like one of the most important things for everybody. But when you can't see, using the right words, explaining how you feel or what you're trying to do, where something is, how something works, developing strategies like you're talking about, like we've done. If I can't do something, well, let's figure out how I can do it, if it is possible at all, and determine if I'm going to be efficient or productive accomplishing it. Maybe it's just doing it, and it has nothing to do with being really fast. I think those are all interesting intricacies and fascinating things about everything in life. Not just blindness. Because sometimes we're sick and we don't do things fast. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we break our arm or leg. It's a temporary thing, hopefully, and we have to adjust and adapt. And that's what blindness has taught me, is to adapt. And I know there's so many things we could comment on, but we'll move on to the last two questions that I'm thinking in my mind. Has blindness, how do I want to ask this question? Do you think blindness, as well as learning from it, has it brought anything important into our lives, or has it created good or bad things? Or this is a challenging question. Maybe you don't have an answer, and that's all right.
Well, for one, I know that blindness has taught me a lot about technology. I would say I was a technophobe, and maybe that's a little harsh on myself. It wasn't that I'm anti-technology. I didn't really consider myself good at technology. And I see how reliant you are on technology. I mean, Siri, Alexa, all the voiceover things that exist, the talking thermometer, everything. And so I think thanks to you, my technology skills, they might have gone from like a -3 to a +4. So, and I don't think I ever would have explored them more. I wouldn't have had anyone to teach me. I wouldn't have been interested. So I think that that's one skill that has definitely improved thanks to you. And I don't know if you would have been as techie as you are now if it wasn't for your blindness. I don't know, but I know I certainly have grown because of your blindness in that realm. And I think that just my general speed and my patience has improved. You might say something to the contrary, but I think that it can be a different pace, and I think it just changes you. You're a little more patient, perhaps a little more grateful. I think, and a little more open-minded.
Yeah, no, it's great responses. I think blindness and having it in our lives, like because of my disability, really just challenges us to adapt or evolve the relationship or our experience. I know when we travel, because you're a flight attendant, we love a lot of similar things. We like to travel, we like food. Maybe our feeling of the pace is changing. I feel like I love traveling, but maybe we're both getting older. We want a different kind of feeling when we travel. But I'm getting off on a tangent. What I'm getting at is like blindness makes you think of more creative ways to, with food or some sort of experience when we go somewhere exotic in the world. And I think that's fun, and that maybe doesn't happen with everybody's relationship. Or sometimes people do think about it because it's kind of cool to experience a taste testing thing, or a food, something like that. But in many other things, the sounds of animals, the sounds of nature, or the area, the environment that you're in, whether it's urban or wild. I think there's so many more things I want to talk about when it comes to that stuff. But the final thing I'd like to ask is, are there any kind of tips or strategies, I guess, for people? I think the biggest one I would give is communication, like we were talking about. It imperative. It's a requirement, to try to communicate well, no matter what. when you have a relationship, especially if there's blindness or visual disorders that involved. What do you think?
You're saying tips for other blinded
For
and
anybody.
sighted couples?
I think it doesn't matter if they're blind or not, but yes, I mean, we're talking about blindness here on the Endeavor to Connect podcast episode.
I would say openness, right? Like, try and challenge your own personal beliefs, because I can say for myself, like, one of my concerns about dating Steve was like, oh my God, like, I would be nervous before a date, like planning, like, well, what can we do? Like, is he going to want to watch a movie? Or, oh my God, we've already been to a comedy club. Like, there's nothing else we can do. But the truth is, it's like you said, like, if you just challenge some of these preconceived notions, you can have a pretty, quote, normal, existence. We love to go to, like you said, we love to travel. We've been to concerts. We've been to comedy clubs. We've watched movies. I had no idea that movies had that thing on them.
Descriptive audio.
Yeah, descriptive audio. A man walks down the beach holding his wife's hand. I mean, I never knew any of this existed. And so, we go for walks every morning that we're together. Literally, we do absolutely any and everything. And so I think, and again, knowing your abilities, which is, yes, you can cook, you can clean, you can do, you can do everything. So I would really just say to someone, just one, like you said, work on communication, because that's key. And two, don't be afraid. Like, don't be afraid, oh, I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. I remember worrying, well, what am I going to get Steve for his birthday? What can I get a blind guy for Christmas? Honestly, I'm going to tell you the answer right now to anyone worrying. Unless they're allergic, the answer to this question is chocolate. It seems to be a
That's
big
my
success.
favorite.
Yeah. So anyway, if you are lucky enough to meet a blind guy who's as cool as Steve, just enjoy every second of it.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you for listening to this episode of Endeavor to Connect. I hope this conversation offered insight, perspective, and encouragement for anyone navigating relationships where disability is part of the story. If you found value in this episode, please consider subscribing, sharing the podcast, and helping spread awareness about the diverse experiences within the blind and visually impaired community. Until next time, keep connecting, keep learning, and keep redefining what's possible.